Are you an idiot? Well, you're in good company. There are about 8 billion idiots on this planet, and that number grows every day. Don't be the guy or gal who says, "I'm not an idiot," because that makes you the biggest idiot of all. We all have our moments of brilliance and moments of idiocy. Embrace it, folks. Don't be ashamed. Without those idiot moments, we'd never be able to appreciate our brilliance. Welcome to I Love My Idiot, a podcast about the idiots we love, the idiots we loathe, and the idiots we can't seem to avoid. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Visit our website at ilovemyidiot.com.
Welcome to our second episode of I Love My Idiot.
Yay, second episode.
We're super excited to have you guys join us again.
Very excited.
I can't believe we made it to a second episode.
I know, we're not one-hit wonders. Isn't that a great feeling? We are not the Chumbawamba of podcasts.
It's true. I mean, here we are, episode 2. It's pretty exciting. The fact that you're actually listening to episode 2 says a lot about us, so we're super grateful for everybody who's listened. But we have a really exciting announcement.
There should be like some lead-in music, but we're not quite there yet as a podcast, so I'm just gonna...
We can't afford the 30-second blip.
Dun, 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 dun. Tell them the news.
We had our first organic listener, so we would actually like to dedicate this entire episode to Dan. Dan, we are so grateful that you have chosen to follow us and to listen to our podcast. So since you're our first organic listener, we're dedicating this whole episode to you. Thank you for being one of the idiots who enjoy our podcast.
Thank you, Dan. And everyone needs to spread the word. Tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell your parents. Speaking of parents, one of our parents did happen to listen to our first episode and requested something that made us think maybe we need to have amendments to our last show.
Our very first amendment to the previous episode is my mom would like the world to know that in her miniskirt, her ass was at least covered. Mom, if you're listening to the second episode, which I doubt you are because the first one was so disappointing to you anyhow. To our follower Dan, though, he loved it. So I don't know what you're talking about. But to Mom, we congratulate you on wearing miniskirts that actually covered your ass.
Way to go. I don't know if this is an amendment, but I would like to point out that in the first episode, I let an F-bomb slip.
Yeah, that one F-bomb made us be coded as explicit on this thing. We're going to lose viewers just because of your one F-bomb.
I know.
My grandma's listening. She's in heaven.
Did your grandma ever slip the occasional F-bomb?
Definitely. My grandma bootlegged whiskey during Prohibition. So, yeah, she definitely let them fly, which is where I probably get my bad language. In fact, I think the first swear word I ever heard came out of my grandma. It was over something stupid, like a fly was in the house, and it was, "Effing flies, I hate them!" I have a potty mouth, and it's genetic.
Here's the funny thing about Rosie's grandma. When she was 90 years old, which granted this woman celebrated her 90th birthday 6 years in a row, so she was probably actually like 96. But one day I'm over there and she shows me this shotgun and I'm like, "Oh, cool, what's this for?" And I'm trying to picture, I mean, this is a 12 gauge. This isn't no 20 gauge. And I'm trying to picture the kick on this thing and I'm like, dude, if she shoots this thing, she's flying across the room. Anyway, so I'm like, "Oh, wow, what's this 12 gauge shotgun for?" And she's like, "I'll tell you what. When those rapists come and break into my house, I'm taking them out with the 12 gauge. And I was thinking, Grandma, now I know there probably is a threat, but I'm like, what sickos live in this town that they're looking for 96-year-old women?
You know, Grandma had this certain suspicions to her.
Yeah, and just in case if the security system of 5 pit bulls gave way, Grandma was there for reinforcements with that 12 gauge.
That's right. That's right. She loved her dogs and she loved her guns.
And whiskey, apparently.
I don't know if she loved whiskey. It was a way of life.
It was a way to make money.
The sad thing is even in her 90s, she was still making bootleg whiskey in her bathtub. I mean, the woman, she never stopped making whiskey just in case there was somebody that wanted to buy it. We love Grandma.
We love you.
We miss her, and she was a great lady. Any other amendments, Clyde, that we'd like to make from episode 1?
I think that's it, but I think that's something we're going to have to do every episode is, after our, extensive fan base listens and points out all the mistakes we
Dan,
made.
you're going to have to let us know how we're doing since you're our only organic listener.
There we go. Dan, we salute you. I wonder how many times we're going to bring Dan up in this episode.
I mean, the whole episode is dedicated to Dan, our one listener, so we're probably going to mention him a few times, I think. I cannot disregard the fact, though, that there are other listeners to our podcast, and those are our family members and friends, so we don't want to disregard you. We also appreciate that you are listening to this podcast.
Today, while Rosie was at work and earning money, I had 3 special guests come here, and this is actually going to come to you as a surprise because I didn't tell you this would be happening, but I had 3 special guests in studio and recording some promos for us to help us get the word out. Are you excited to hear this?
Oh my gosh. I have no idea what's coming.
Well,
I can only imagine the idiotic things that you've dreamed up during the day while I'm slaving away at work.
Well, the great thing is I've always dreamed up idiotic things while you've been at work, but now I kind of have an outlet with this podcast. So anyways, without further ado, here we go.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to I Love My Idiot. This is my parents' podcast. My name is Rex. The proceeds of this podcast goes straight into my college fund. I'm gonna need it, folks, considering the idiot genetic coding I was given. There clearly will not be a scholarship in my future.
All right, so that was guest number 1. As you heard, that was Rex, our 10-year-old son, soon to be 11.
Dude, I guarantee you that kid's not getting any scholarships. Have you seen his grades? I'm really glad that he's hoping to get the proceeds from this podcast. But here's the thing, Clyde. We have so much further to go in making any money off this podcast because we paid for all these equipment and supplies. It's going to be a while before anything's going into that kid's college fund.
Yes, but if the addition of Dan shows me anything, it's that we're well on our way. Thank you, Dan. Tell your friends. All right, I've got a second promo here. A second guest showed up at the studio.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to I Love My Idiot. This is my parent podcast. My name is James. I hope you continue to listen. Really, I am counting on it. The proceeds to this podcast go straight into my college fund. So far, they have made a nickel, so looks like community college it is.
Yeah, these kids better get used to the idea of community college.
Hey, don't be bashing community college. I attended community college. It was the best thing I ever did.
The best thing you ever did?
Definitely. Saved me a ton of money by going to community college the first couple of years. So, dude, I'm pushing them towards community college. That is hilarious that our kids are wanting to make promos for our podcast. I mean, it just goes to show that this is truly a family ordeal.
It is. And what's funny is as much as you and I talk about the podcast, we didn't even let our children listen to the first podcast, partially because I dropped an F-bomb and we don't swear around our kids. They've been so excited about this podcast, which is just funny.
I love my idiot.
Oh my god, I gotta hear it again. Play it one more time.
I love my
That was the angel in our house. That was little Rosie. Little Rosie, you mentioned before that she runs this household when you're not home. I agreed and said it was true. Now, I'll have you know that I did not intend on little Rosie recording a promo. I told the boys that they could, but she instantly got offended and would not have it any other way.
All right, guys, I think you, the audience, mostly Dan, should vote on which promo we should use first on the next podcast. Please vote, let us know, and we will make it happen.
This last week, we did quite a bit of traveling. The day we were trying to get our podcast up and ready, we found out about a family emergency that made us pile in the car and drive 7 hours. Because of that, it got us thinking about some classic family vacations. And I think when everyone looks back on their life and they look back on their childhood, they think about family vacations and how funny they were, how messed up they were. So today, for our main topic, we were thinking we could talk about family vacations and how some of those family vacations actually shaped the relationships we had with our family and the relationships we had with our parents, and even shaped, the very people we may become.
I would not say that I am shaped by any of the family vacations that I ever took. And I also imagine that family vacations in the November household looked a lot different. So when I was a kid, family vacations were always based around some form of making money for my family. We would go berry picking, but we couldn't eat any of the berries. Or we would go to look for pine cones because you can actually sell pine cones that are not fully ripened and opened for their seeds. And so
now,
we would do things like that.
This is an interesting concept about the pine cones, because before about a week ago, when you mentioned this with the pine cones, I had never heard of this. Go into a little more detail about the pine cones, because it's fascinating. We find pine cones all over. Every time I go for a walk, I step over a million pine cones. So when you said that you picked up pine cones, I was like, why don't you just pick them up? They're everywhere. So explain. Why is it that it's harder to pine cone than you might suspect? And yes, I did just use pine cone as a verb.
We called it coning. I don't know if everybody calls it coning. We would literally drive for hours into the mountains where you wouldn't see another human for miles and miles and miles. In fact, it was so bad that you'd have to carry gas in your car to fill your tank back up so that you could get back off the mountain. You would have to find a certain kind of pine cone. Now, granted, I have been doing this since I was a very small child, so I had to learn at a young age what the right kind of pine cone looked like. Basically, it's when a pine cone is not open. It hasn't dried out, it's still wet, it's still closed, and those seeds are being protected by the shell of the cone. What happens is squirrels will go up into trees. They will pluck down these pine cones and they will bury them into the earth in bushels. And so basically when you're pine coning, the adults are focusing a lot on the trees, but the kids are digging holes, and we're digging looking for bushels. And if you found a bushel of pine cones, it was like the best thing, because then you knew the day was almost over, because we had to fill buckets of pine cones. And until those buckets were full of these special closed perfect pine cones, we weren't going home. And by home, I mean to the campground that we made ourselves out of tarps and sticks. Literally, we didn't own tents. We owned tarps. You'd put a tarp on the ground. You'd hang the corners of the tarp between trees or sticks, and you would sleep under them, hoping to stay dry, which you never did. It was a really weird existence. Needless to say, we would fill buckets with pine cones, take them down the hill, sell them, make money, and then do it again the next year.
You know how sometimes you're in the woods and you drive past a really nice breakfast in bed? Did you ever pass one of those and see that and be like, why can't we stay there, or anything like that?
There were times where we would be sleeping in the car and I would be thinking, I wish I just had a bed right now. You wake up all cranked and hurting, and it really was not very much fun.
And did you ever get blisters on your hands from digging?
Definitely. The nice thing about pine cones is they're actually a pretty decent size. So if I had to pick between pine coning and berry picking, I would choose pine coning all day long because at least we could fill those buckets and we knew like when the buckets were full, we were going to get to go build a fire. We always had marshmallows. It was really exciting. We always roasted hot dogs over the fire, and those were the moments where we had joy amongst the work. I would much rather do pine cones than berries. So let me tell you a little bit about berry picking. Now you can make a lot of money depending on the kind of berries that you're picking, but berries are small. You have to pick a ton of berries, and they have to be the perfect amount between ripe and not ripe. If you get too green, you can't sell it. How on earth did my mom find people who wanted to buy this stuff?
Were you excited about summer break as a child, knowing that you were going to have to go berry picking and pine cone picking? Or were you like, no, I wish school kept going through the summer?
When you're a kid, I don't think you know things are weird until you grow up and you're like talking to your boyfriend about pine coning and they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? I think...
Sorry, Grandma. Well, looks like this episode is going to be listed as explicit too.
You know, as a kid, I think you just think, well, that's just a part of life, right? Like,
that's very true.
This is what we do, you know, we make money doing it. The awesome thing is there was this really great Mexican restaurant in the town. And like the reward was always that with the proceeds of whatever we were collecting that time of the summer, we would get to go out to dinner. And as a very poor child in a household that rarely had food that wasn't from a can given to us by a food bank of some kind, it was a real treat to get to go out. So I think we always had that motivating factor that was, we're going to get to eat chips and salsa. It's going to be awesome. You make the best of what you have. And you know what? I have an awesome sister and brother, and they made berry picking and pine coning fun. We would make a game of it. We would be really competitive. My brother always won. I swear the kid could smell it out. He could find the biggest bushels and we would be like, how did you do it? But he always had the best luck. If we ever went pine coning, Seamus won. If we ever went berry picking, Rosie won. It just was what it was. And my sister, she really didn't.
She was the caboose.
She was somewhere in the middle of both of us, usually sitting on the side somewhere, like complaining that we were in the heat or the wind or whatever weather temperature was happening.
She's like, I'll go look for pine cones under this shade tree.
Yeah, she'd probably be like digging a hole with a stick somewhere. Is there anything in that hole? Like, you need to move on to the next place.
Wait, did you guys have shovels? Or did your parents literally give you sticks and say, go find pine cones?
We did not have shovels. The adults had shovels. If you found a bushel, usually you called over an adult who had like a decent sized shovel that could like dig more. We did take a couple of fun family vacations.
Okay, but before we get to the fun family vacations, I have one final question. Okay, you talked about the Mexican food, you talked about the gas, and then having to have an extra can of gas. Can you make enough from pine coning to where you were even making money after the extra can of gas, after the Mexican food?
Oh, yeah. They were making money. I don't have the ability to Google right now because I don't bring my phone into this, but you can make a whole bunch of money. One time with the pine cones, like, we found so many, we walked away with $600.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember it being a really big deal because it was like...
That means when you go to Mexican, you could get a soda, too.
I know.
That's exciting.
It was exciting. It was very exciting. No, they definitely made money doing it.
So tell about a fun vacation, one where you weren't working your tail off.
This is an homage to my aunt, who was actually the same age as me. So my grandpa had a second wife that was half his age, and he had a daughter that was my age, and we used to sometimes take trips with my grandpa and his second wife and my aunt, who at the time I called my cousin because I didn't know that she was actually my aunt until later because we were the same age and it was weird to call somebody an aunt who's the same age as you. We took a trip to the coast and it was so fun. cabin. My grandpa had this 1970s camp trailer, and we had the best time. But one of the interesting things was that there wasn't enough sleeping space in the Winnebago to hold all of our people. We piled into that thing like a clown car, and there was just 15 people in one camper. I mean, it was ridiculous. Because there wasn't enough places for people to sleep, me and my aunt had to figure out a way to construct something to sleep in outside. So we found like the biggest sticks we could, propped up this thing, and it really worked. It started pouring down rain at the coast. The wind was blowing so hard that our whole thing flew away. Until all it was like me and her on the ground with like some sleeping bags shivering, and we ended up going and like piling back up inside of the camper with everybody else and like basically sleeping almost on top of each other just to get through the night. But it was a funny story because here we were like these little engineers constructing our own sleeping space, and we were so proud of it, and then it just took one gust of wind to like completely demolish what we had spent hours building. It was actually a very fun trip though, because we got to actually go walk on the beach and have fun as a family. And then a few years later, we returned to the coast, but this time it was with my mom after the divorce. That time I think we had rented a hotel room, probably with the $600 from picking up pine cones.
You had a good pine coning season.
Yeah, exactly. Then we got to go to the coast and, actually do a real family vacation. What happened was my brother and I decided that we wanted to go for a walk on the beach. We were gone for 4 hours. We actually got lost on the beach to the point where patrons were stopping to help us because we were crying. And we had no idea where we were, because I don't know if you've ever been walking for miles and miles on a beach, but everything starts to look exactly the same. At one point, my brother was like, I remember seeing a log. And we'd look around and there would be like 150 logs that looked exactly the same. And we were just walking and walking and walking. And I thought that we were never going to find our way. Like, we were for sure going to be those kids that just went missing. Now, keep in mind, at this time, my brother is 8 years old and I am 11. Who trusts an 8 and an 11-year-old to go walk the beach for hours and hours? But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that we were gone for 4 hours and not a single person went looking for us. Nobody went combing the beach for us. So I grew up in a family where you could go missing for 4 hours and nobody cared or knew that you were missing.
Or noticed. You know how on those like FBI forensic file type shows, they always say if someone goes missing, if you don't find them in the first 48 hours, there's a good chance you'll never find them. With your family, it would probably take more than 48 hours just for your parents to realize 2 of their kids were missing. So you had that working against you. But
yeah.
That was a different day and age. In today's day and age, you would get child services called on you if you let your 11 and 8-year-old just wander the beach for 4 hours. In our day and age, that was just society. Kids were not sheltered the way they are now. And really, I don't resent the fact that society had that, because some of the biggest thrills of my life that ever happened were when I was on my bicycle and I was convinced the car behind me was trying to kidnap me, and I was like a mile from home and, the race of my life. Now, granted, they would always end up passing me, and then I'd be like, oh, phew, I wasn't actually about to get kidnapped. But I tell you, for like 2 minutes, you've got your heart pounding and you're like, you feel like the hamster in the wheel, like just cranking out as fast as you can, thinking like, this guy is gonna rape me.
Yeah, needless to say, I'm pretty sure we could have been gone for a day and nobody would be, like, looking for us. So.
Yeah, your dad would be like, man, it's nice and quiet and peaceful. The kids are finally being good.
Yeah, maybe if my dad was around during that time, it was just Mom and, just like, Mom. Some of her weirdo friends who decided to go to the coast with us. they're probably just drinking beer in the hotel room, not even like caring about where we are. And honestly, it was by the grace of God that we were even found, because we happened to be walking and all of a sudden I see my little sister from the corner of my eyes, and she's just standing like on these stairs that walk down into the beach, just like calling our names, just yelling out our names. Rosie, Seamus, Rosie, Seamus. All of a sudden, when I saw her, it was like as if I had seen an angel come straight down from heaven, because we were so scared and hungry and tired and just didn't have any idea where we were. And when we saw her, it was incredible. The emotions that came through us, both of us just started crying and ran to her. And when we got to her, she totally didn't understand why that we were so emotional. She was just like, oh, I just barely came down here and called your name, and there you were. So she thought that we had been there the whole time, not realizing that we were just roaming the entire coast for hours and hours. It was crazy.
That's hilarious.
But
well,
yeah, we lived.
I'm glad you lived, you survived, and I'm glad you had that experience, because there have been multiple times over the course of our marriage that I've heard you and Seamus get together and actually talk about that experience. And this is why I say that sometimes the family vacations can shape us, is because when you get back together with those siblings that you love or the people you love, sometimes it's those memories, even if they were miserable in the time, that you end up leaning back on and talking about. Did you have any other family vacations that stood out?
No, not really. I mean, we really didn't take a lot of family vacations.
You had also told me mostly vacations were either pine coning or to visit some family member that, you could stay with for free.
No, not to visit. I told you when I was very young, my dad was a junker. So if we were going somewhere, it was like to pick something up that was possibly being bartered or traded for. The one time I went to California when I was a kid, it was to go pick up some broke down vehicle that my dad had traded something for. We would call it a vacation, like pile us all in the car or truck to go get whatever junk my dad had collected.
So literally every time besides 2 coast trips you went out of town, it was so your parents could make money of some kind.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We vacationed
Crafty
for
people.
utility. Like, vacationing was for work. It had to be accomplishing something because you couldn't afford to do it otherwise. Yeah, but we made the best of it. We had a good time. We were always playing and trying to make the best of every situation that we had. And like I said earlier in the podcast, you don't really know that your life is weird until later when you're talking to other people about it and they're like, yeah, we don't get that.
And you always make that assumption that everyone kind of went through the same thing. So the first time you're in that situation, you're like, you probably went junking with your dad too. And they look at you like, what the hell are you talking about?
Exactly.
Or at least that's how I feel like the first year of our relationship, when you would talk about your childhood, you'd always talk about it as if I would recognize what you talked about. And I would always just be like, huh, yeah, my parents didn't do that. I don't think we're of the same ilk.
That's right.
But that's all right, because we have combined. We are now of the same ilk. The way we're raising our children, we're bringing in some of what you had, some of what I have. We're mixing it together, throwing a little dirt on it, and calling it good.
A little more of what you had versus what I had. I mean, my kids have never understood what berry stains do to your hands or what it means to get a blister from digging with a stick to get pine cones out of the earth.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever gone junking, although that's a travesty because I guarantee you Rex would love junking.
Dude, Rex is probably going to be a junker someday.
I know. And now that I think about it, we got to keep as much distance between that kid and Papa as possible because he's one junking trip away from becoming a lifelong junker for sure.
Definitely.
Which I could see him starting it before he's even out of the house and coming home with random shit that we're like, what the? We don't want this. Go put that back where you found it. I do have a story about junking. When Rosie and I went to meet her parents, I had already met her mom because her mom had come into town to visit us once, but I had never met her dad. But I knew that her dad's opinion meant a lot to her. So as we went, I put a lot of pressure on myself. I wanted to come across as a really sharp young man. I wanted to seem solid. I wanted them to know that I was going to be a good boyfriend, fiance, husband eventually to their daughter.
I'm just going to throw it out there that I warned you that that was not necessary.
So we end up going and visiting her father. Essentially, Rosie is going to have this girls' day out, which leads me time alone with her father. And I was like, oh, what a great opportunity. You know, I can get to know him. He can get to know me. Maybe even tell him, you know, how much I love his daughter and everything. And so I did the silly thing. I brought my nicest pair of clothes, a nice collared shirt, a pair of shorts that were nice. As soon as all the girls leave for their girls' day out, I look at her father and said, hey, so what's on the schedule for us today? And he says to me, we're going to go get a transmission. And I was like, oh, I'm like, at the parts shop? He's like, no. He's like, they're in the field 3 farms away. There's been a transmission sitting there. Farmer Joe or whoever told me that if I bring such and such, if I bring 8 cinder blocks or something like that, I can trade for this transmission. And I'm like, is it a working transmission? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay. So we go down to Farmer Joe's, not his real name, but to protect his identity and the fact that I have no idea who the hell was living there. Because Farmer Joe never even came out. Like,
for all you know, my dad could have been stealing
totally. And I'm pretty sure we never left cinder blocks or whatever the deal was. We never left anything. We showed up. In fact, I might be a criminal. I've never purposely committed a crime, but I might be a criminal. We go down to this field, and sure enough, here is this transmission. Now, I'm not a big car guy. I didn't even know what a transmission looked like, but it's huge. And I'm like, okay, now I get why you couldn't do this by yourself. So he's like, hey.
Did he by chance say we only have so many minutes to get this thing off?
He's like, and run! No, he did not say anything like that. But he tells me, like, go ahead and grab that side there. And this thing is greasy beyond anything I've ever seen in my life. Right? It's like if you took a slab of bacon, cooked it, and then poured it on top of a transmission that had been running for years. That's how greasy this thing was. I grab one side of this transmission. The second I touch it, it's almost like the grease is alive. I can feel it climbing up my arm, going toward my nice shirt. Now, it was a short sleeve shirt, yet somehow my entire arm gets covered and it gets to the sleeves of the shirt. It gets smeared on the front of the shirt. It's a white shirt with these blue stripes on it. It was a nice shirt. It was one of my all-time favorite shirts. And you know what? I've never found a shirt of that quality again, but it was destroyed by the grease, by this transmission, which holding this transmission, which was at least a couple 100 pounds, we had to do that awkward penguin walk for like the distance of 3 farms because your dad was like 3 farms away. We had to do that awkward penguin walk down the street. Meanwhile, your dad's trying to hustle me, which I never put 2 and 2 together, but now I realize he's trying to hustle me because we're criminals, and I'm doing the backwards walk. He's pushing. I'm like, dude,
he's hustling you because he's old and it's hard for him to lift that transmission.
Yeah, well, every time he's like pushing it forward, trying to get me to walk faster backwards, that thing is just brushing further up against my white shirt. After we're done with that, I'm like looking at my clothes. My shorts are ruined. My shirt's ruined. Everything's ruined. And I'm thinking like, that sucked. And then he's like, oh, we're not done. And then he's got like a whole bunch more junk to go pick up. Now, It was less significant, so I don't remember what all the items were, but here's what I do remember, and this I found very strange. First thing he said is, well, I gotta go get some gas. So we go to this gas station, and he puts $6 of gas in. And I was like, only $6? And he's like, yeah, because we're just going over to Bob's house or something. He's like, he's not far. So we go to Bob's house, and while we're at Bob's house picking up whatever in your dad's truck, Bob mentions that so-and-so has some car part. So your dad's like, oh, great, let's go get that. So we drive back to the gas station. He puts like $5 more in so we can make it to the next person's house. So we go to the next person's house. We're picking up more junk. And that person, once again, tells him, hey, you know where Fred lives? If we go to Fred's house, he's got such and such. So we go back to the gas station to put like $3 more in. And at this point, like, I said to him, I was like, I have some money. We can just top your tank up. Your dad looks at me and he's like, what are you saying? That you don't think I can fill my own tank? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, dude, why you put, like, we've wasted more gas going back and forth from the gas station. Like, just fill the tank. But it was like, he only wanted to fill it with the amount that he knew he was going to drive. I don't know if that was a normal thing in your childhood.
Oh, it was,
or if payday was coming up or something. I don't know. Anyways, junking with your dad, great memory, and yeah.
Yeah, I do recall, though, that you never ended up asking my father for my hand in marriage, and when you got in the car to go home that very same day as the junking experience, you said, I don't think I needed to ask your dad to marry you because I needed to save you from this lifestyle.
Exactly. And you know what? I carried a transmission 3/4 of a mile walking backwards with him. I think that was all the permission I needed. I was like, yep, we're good. I'm going to marry your daughter. I'm going to be your son. This experience pretty much sealed it. Great times.
I'm so glad that despite that junking experience, you still chose to marry me.
Oh, absolutely. I had to marry you. The fact of the matter is, in every relationship, there's winners and losers. Clyde is the winner. And yes, I just spoke about myself in the third person. I'm the winner in this relationship.
You are the winner.
Like, I am an average dude at best. I somehow scored a 10, so I'm doing pretty good. But one thing I would like to point out, I don't resent the junking story at all. In fact, I love that story. So even though it's funny, and even though I tell it as if it was the weirdest thing I had ever been through, I tell that story mainly because I love that experience. It was a time where I got to know your dad. Your dad's a great guy. I have a lot of respect for your dad. I value him. He's a great grandpa, a great papa to my kids. And I think that's the majority of the stories we're going to tell. Even though they're funny, even though sometimes they might be twisted, we tell them out of love.
That's right. The people that we talk about are people that we value and love and appreciate. So thanks for being a part of our journey. So we'd like to move on now to our Idiot Spotlight.
All right, so for this week, our Idiot Spotlight is idiots in the movie theater.
We hate those idiots.
I think everybody has had moments where you run into an idiot in the movie theater. The first idiot I would like to talk about is the idiot that shushes you in the movie theater before the previews have even begun.
Ugh.
This has happened to me twice, and both times it's just frustrated the heck out of me. Because if you show up early for a movie, you should be allowed to talk. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Clyde and I don't get a lot of opportunities to go to a movie, considering that we have 3 kids and they don't do well in the movie theater. So we end up having to find a babysitter. And if we're going through the effort of finding a sitter, it makes it very difficult to deal with idiots in the movie theater.
It does. Don't ruin our date night.
That's right.
All right, so what's another idiot you've run into in the theater?
Okay, remember yesterday when we were at the movies and we were the only 2 on the top row? Pretty soon this guy who doesn't even have a date comes and sits right next to us. There are 15 other seats on the row. The whole row in front of us is empty. He comes and sits right next to me. Now, granted, Clyde was just saying that I'm a 10. Just because I'm a 10 doesn't mean I want you to sit right next to me.
Especially if you're wearing a flannel and have BO. I'm just saying.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that was uncomfortable. And I understand you want to be as close to the middle as possible. So, A, show up a little earlier like we did. And B, if the top row middle is taken, go to the second top row middle. It's not that hard. That guy was an idiot. And did you notice his awkward laugh?
It was terrible.
He had this hideous laugh, and he kept laughing at parts, and it was an extended laugh that would make you miss the subsequent joke. It was very frustrating.
Also, don't be the idiot who puts your feet on my seat from behind. I do not want to smell your feet, nor do I want my chair to be kicked every 5 seconds. So don't be an idiot and put your feet on the seat behind me.
Now, I put my feet on the seat all the time, but I have the decency to put my feet down if there's someone in the seat in front of me.
Don't bring your own snacks into the movies.
No. So, here's the thing. Rosie and I used to always bring snacks to the theater.
Yeah, when we were poor college kids.
She never said word one about it.
That's because we couldn't afford snacks back then. We could barely afford our submission into the movie theater.
Yeah, but you know what? With how expensive snacks are, it doesn't matter how much money you make. It's ridiculous. You pay $20 to get 2 of us in, and then if we each want a drink, piece of candy, and a thing of popcorn to share, there's $30.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous that snacks cost more than the price of admission.
Okay, but here's the thing. It is embarrassing carrying in my purse knowing that you have shoved all of your snacks into it. Like, I feel really uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, I think the one that makes you the most uncomfortable is when I sneak a soda can in there. I try really hard to do the opening of the can. You know the sound. I try to do that very quietly.
Yeah, you can't do that quietly. Everybody knows that you have a soda can.
I always try to wait for like a big explosion that's happening on screen or something like that to try to mask the sound. But the truth of the matter is, who cares? Other people aren't looking at me like, that guy's an idiot.
Also, if you bring your small children into a movie theater, keep them in their seat.
As soon as they start getting in their mind that that's what they're doing, I take them out. And honestly, I've spent more time at the movie theater in the lobby recently because when we bring little Rosie, she can't handle it. The boys, they're pretty good through the movie, but little Rosie struggles, and everyone's gonna go through that. But I try to be courteous to the people around me. I try to make sure I take my kids out into the lobby if they're being disruptive.
But I think that's a rarity. From what I've seen, most parents just let it be the playground for the kids.
Absolutely. And remember, a crying baby ruins it for everyone. You have to choose the nachos.
Oh my gosh, Clyde, you and I differ entirely on this whole subject. The things that I find idiotic are things that you enjoy doing or do every single time.
Oh yeah, and I've got it figured out because I have figured out which cashier puts the most cheese on. And there is this one lady that not only fills the little cup with the nacho cheese, but she then spreads it over all the chips. That is the lady to go through. You don't go to the little skinny 16-year-old that doesn't appreciate the nacho cheese. Like, that absolutely drives me crazy. She doesn't even fill the cup all the way full. And oftentimes, she'll be sitting there like, I can help whoever's next. And I'm like, no. I'm waiting for this lady. I don't care if I'm the third person in line.
Clyde is highly addicted to cheese.
Melted cheese is my favorite food. It's right up there with soup.
Don't be an idiot in the movie theater.
And I think that's all we have for this week's episode. Thank you, Dan. Remember, this entire episode is dedicated to you. I hope we see you again next week, Dan. And remember, spread the word. Tell your friends. Our website, ilovemyidiot.com. You can view us there. Leave us a comment. Give us a suggestion for the Idiot Spotlight.
Thanks for joining us.
I love my idiot.